The grand hall of Baron Kharazan was built to intimidate. Its high vaulted ceiling arched like the ribs of some long-dead beast. The walls were plated with silver alloy that shimmered under the torchlight, and the floor was polished to a mirror. Shine. Yet none of that majesty was meant to inspire awe. It was meant to remind all who entered that they were beneath the Baron, a ruler of worlds and breaker of wills. Tonight, the hall was filled with his peers, alien nobles clad in armor that glittered like scales, courtiers whose jeweled eyes glowed faintly in the gloom, and mercenaries standing stiff at attention along the walls. At the center, beneath the throne of twisted iron and bone, stood a human, Commander Elias Ward of Earth, his hands bound in iron cuffs, his uniform torn and dusty from battle. His capture had been a triumph for the Baron. Humans were a rising force in the galaxy, too bold and too proud, and Elias had led raids that struck hard against Kharazan's fleets. Breaking him here, in front of the court, would be sweeter than any battlefield victory. "Look at him," the Baron's voice boomed, mandibles clacking as laughter rippled through the chamber. "The ape who thought he could outwit me. See how small he stands beneath my throne. See how his defiance crumbles in my presence." Elias did not bow. His chin remained high, his eyes steady, even as the nobles jeered. That quiet refusal only deepened their amusement. They expected groveling. His calmness struck them as absurd. But Kharazan had planned a greater humiliation. He leaned forward, his massive form creaking the throne, and motioned with one clawed hand. Servants emerged from the shadows, wheeling forward something strange, a chair of black alloy, humming faintly with power. Upon it sat a figure, a young woman, her skin a faint iridescent blue, smooth like polished stone under the light. Her hair was a cascade of silver, her large dark eyes unblinking. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, but her body told another story. Her legs lay twisted and unmoving, draped beneath the folds of her gown. Her hands shook faintly, tremors she could not control. She sat still not by choice but by necessity. "This," the Baron declared, rising with a cruel grin, "is my daughter Lyra. Once she was the jewel of my house, the brightest flame among my bloodline. But a fall from the spires left her broken, her spine shattered. She cannot walk, cannot fight, cannot even lift a blade. She is worthless to me, worthless to my house, worthless to the galaxy." The nobles chuckled, some laughing outright, their eyes glinting with malicious delight. Kharazan turned his gaze to Elias, savoring the moment. "You crave honor, human. You cling to dignity even in chains. Then take her. Take my broken daughter as your bride. She is yours." The laughter swelled, echoing across the hall. To them, this was the pinnacle of mockery. To give a proud warrior such a gift was to insult him beyond words. But Elias did not laugh. He did not scowl, nor show shame. His eyes had shifted from the Baron to Lyra. For the first time since his capture, something stirred within him. Not anger, but recognition. Because Lyra's eyes were not empty. They were not the eyes of someone defeated. No, behind their calm surface, Elias saw something fierce, something unyielding. The nobles saw a broken body. He saw a spirit that refused to break. The moment stretched. The laughter began to falter, uncertain. Elias stepped forward, the clank of his chains echoing in the silence. Slowly, he bowed, not to the Baron, not to the jeering crowd, but to the woman in the chair. He reached out, his hand firm yet gentle, and placed it over her trembling one. "I accept," he said clearly, his voice cutting through the hall like steel. "Not as a joke, not as humiliation, but as my ally." The chamber went deathly quiet. The mockery that had seemed so assured suddenly felt brittle, hollow. The Baron's mandibles clicked in irritation, the laughter of his court dissolving. into uneasy whispers. Only Lyra did not look surprised. For the first time, her lips curved into the faintest smile, small, restrained, but real. The days following the gift were strange ones for Elias. He had expected chains, a cell, perhaps even execution. Instead, he found himself housed in the Baron's fortress, watched, yes, and treated like an amusing pet by the court, but not locked away. His only true tether was Lyra, the Baron's discarded daughter, whom he was now expected to keep as a mock bride. The fortress itself was a cold place, all towering spires and shadowed corridors. Its halls were patrolled by soldiers with insectoid eyes and armor that gleamed like oil. To them, Elias was an object of ridicule. They would sneer, bark out laughs, or mutter insults whenever he passed. Yet their scorn did not strike him half as deeply as the quiet isolation that seemed to hang over Lyra's quarters. Her rooms were set apart from the rest of the fortress, tucked away in a high wing that overlooked the storm-racked cliffs below. It was a space at once grand and suffocating, wide glass windows, elegant furnishings, but an air of abandonment that hung like dust. When Elias first entered, he expected to find her idle, lost in bitterness as her father had claimed. Instead, he stopped short. The room was cluttered with fragments of machinery, broken drones spread open like dissected insects, coils of wire strewn across the floor, half-built consoles glowing faintly on a workbench. Amid the chaos sat Lyra, in her alloy chair, hands trembling but moving with delicate precision as she tightened a joint on a hovering device. She looked up at him then, her dark eyes sharp, calculating. "You're early," she said simply, her voice calm and even. Elias blinked. "I didn't know I had a schedule." A faint twitch of her lips might have been a smile. "Everyone has a schedule here. Some just don't realize it." That was the beginning. In the days that followed, Elias learned that Lyra's frailty was a mask, real in body, yes, but concealing a mind as sharp as any blade he had ever wielded. She spoke with precision, rarely wasting words, but every sentence carried weight. She had once been a prodigy, she explained, a designer of propulsion systems for her father's fleets. Nobles had praised her, admirals had sought her counsel. And then came the fall, an accident in the spires that shattered her spine and left her body paralyzed from the waist down. "My father saw no more use for me after that," she said one evening, her gaze fixed on the storm outside the windows. "His world values strength of arms, strength of legs. A ruler's daughter who cannot stand is an embarrassment. Easier to hide me here than to endure the sight." Her voice was steady, but Elias caught the steel beneath it. She was not resigned. She was not broken. She was angry. "They think me weak," she whispered, fingers tightening on the edge of her chair. "But strength is not in the legs, nor in the arms. Strength is in here." She tapped her temple. "And mine still works." Elias found himself listening, not out of pity, but respect. He had seen too many soldiers mistake muscle for power. Too many commanders think strategy was a matter of shouting louder than the next. Lyra saw the world differently. Where others saw walls, she saw paths. Where others saw soldiers, she saw patterns. He began helping her. At first, it was small things, fetching tools, steadying a piece of equipment while her trembling. Hands soldered wires into place, but soon it became more. She began teaching him the schematics, showing him how her people's drones could be reprogrammed, how supply lines could be disrupted without firing a shot. "You fight with your body," she said once, not unkindly. "But you must also learn to fight with your mind. Otherwise, you will always be playing your enemy's game." He took her words to heart. In return, he gave her something her father never had: acknowledgement. He asked her questions as a student, would of a teacher. He listened when she explained, carried the pieces she could not lift, and treated her not as a burden, but as a partner. For every sneer he endured in the hallways, he found balance in her calm certainty. It was during one of their long nights, bent over a cracked console, that the truth struck him. Curzon had thought to mock him with this gift. But Elias was beginning to see it differently. The Baron had not shackled him with weakness. He had handed him brilliance, an ally whose mind could unravel empires. The storm outside the fortress raged for 3 nights straight, lightning clawing at the skies while the oceans below crashed against the cliffs with deafening fury. It was on the 3rd night that Lyra spoke of her greatest secret. Elias had grown used to their long conversations by then. By day, they studied schematics and sabotaged minor systems in the fortress under the guards' noses. By night, they spoke about Earth, about her people, about dreams that once seemed dead. But that evening, her voice carried a different weight, as though she had been turning something over in her mind for far too long. "There was a project," she began softly, her eyes never leaving the stormlit window. "One I started before my fall." Elias glanced up from the dismantled drone he was working on. "A project?" Her trembling hands moved across her desk, pulling open a hidden compartment he had never noticed before. From it, she withdrew a crystalline tablet, its surface glowing faintly with coded symbols. She slid it toward him. "It was called the Ascendant Frame," she said. "A neural exosuit, flesh and machine bound together, a way to amplify the weak, to let the crippled move again, or to give the strong the strength of 10. My father forbade it. He feared it would make his soldiers too independent, feared it would make his enemies harder to crush. So I hid my work." Elias studied the glowing diagrams. The suit was sleek, elegant, an exoskeleton that seemed alive, with channels of energy flowing like veins through alloy limbs. It wasn't just armor, it was liberation. "Does it exist?" Elias asked carefully. Her eyes, usually calm, flickered with something brighter. "Hope. The prototype. I built it in secret, hid it where my father's spies would never look. But I could never finish it. Not alone, not after." She gestured at her legs with a flicker of bitterness. "But with your help." The air between them shifted. For the first time, Elias saw not just her anger or her intelligence. He saw her yearning, not just to prove herself to her father, not just to escape the fortress, but to stand, to walk again, to fight. "I'll help you," Elias said without hesitation. Her eyes widened slightly at the certainty in his voice, but she did not question it. Instead, she nodded once. "Then tonight, we begin." They moved under cover of the storm. Guards huddled against the rain, too distracted by the thunder to notice 2 shadows slipping through the corridors. Lyra guided him with precision, whispering directions while Elias carried her in his arms, her chair left behind to avoid suspicion. For all her frailty, her presence was steady, her voice unwavering. At last, they reached the hidden chamber. Beneath the fortress's eastern spire, deep in the storage vaults, lay a wall panel marked with the insignia of an abandoned mining division. With careful hands, Elias pried it open to reveal a hollow cavity, and within, wrapped in cloth and dust, was the prototype. Even unfinished, it was breathtaking. The frame gleamed faintly, as though it hungered to be awakened. They smuggled it back piece by piece over the following days, concealing the parts beneath sheets and tools. At night, they worked together. Elias welded and lifted where her trembling fingers faltered, while she guided him with exacting precision. Slowly, the frame took shape, a lattice of alloy limbs, servos that whispered like breath, and a spinal harness that glowed faintly with dormant power. When the final piece clicked into place, silence filled the room. The exosuit stood waiting, tall and slender, like a second skin forged of light and steel. Lyra's hands trembled, not from weakness now, but from anticipation. Elias lifted her gently, cradling her against his chest, and set her within the suit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the frame hummed to life. Light raced across the alloy, flowing into her like rivers of fire. The servos adjusted, the limbs straightened, and for the first time in years, Lyra rose from her chair. Her eyes widened as she looked down at her feet, which now stood firmly on the ground. She lifted one, then the other, taking a step, then another. The suit moved as though it were an extension of her body, each motion fluid, seamless. Her laughter broke the silence. Not a bitter laugh, nor a mocking one, but a pure, triumphant sound. She clenched her hands into fists, raised her arms, and let the storm outside answer her with thunder. "I can walk," she whispered, awestruck. Then, louder, fiercer, "I can fight." Elias felt pride swell in his chest as he watched her. No chains, no mockery, no scorn could take this moment from her. She was no longer the Baron's broken daughter. She was something new, something powerful. The transformation of Lyra was more than physical. Yes, the exosuit gave her legs again, gave her the strength to lift, to strike, to move with the grace she had once thought forever lost. But what truly changed was the way she looked at herself. For the first time since her fall, she did not see a broken body in a chair. She saw a leader reborn. Elias noticed it in her voice first. Where before she had spoken with quiet sharpness, now her words carried weight, urgency, and fire. Her mind had always been sharp, but now her body gave her presence. When she stood before others, even in the secrecy of abandoned storage chambers, her posture alone silenced the room. It began with whispers. Servants who had long been discarded by the Baron's court, maids whose hands shook too much to carry trays, soldiers whose injuries had left them limping, engineers whose mistakes had earned them exile to menial tasks. They drifted toward Lyra, drawn by something they could not name at first. Some came out of curiosity, others out of bitterness. But once they saw her, once they heard her, curiosity turned to conviction. "They call us broken," Lyra told them one evening, standing in the glow of the exosuit's faint light. The storm outside cast jagged shadows across her face, making her look both alien and divine. "They cast us aside because we do not fit their perfect image of strength. But weakness is not what they say it is. We have been tempered. We have endured scorn and pain, and still we are here. That is strength." Her words struck like lightning. The outcasts who had lived in silence now found themselves nodding, their eyes brightening. Elias watched it happen, watched their slumped shoulders straighten, watched their doubts burn away. "And today," Lyra continued, her voice firm, "we rise, not to beg for acceptance, not to prove ourselves to the likes of Curzon, but to build a world where none of us are ever discarded again." The chamber erupted in quiet, determined applause. For the first time, Elias saw the beginnings of an army. The rebellion began not with open war, but with whispers of sabotage. Under Lyra's direction, Elias and the outcasts targeted the Baron's lifelines. Supply convoys went missing in the night. Fuel depots erupted in flames, their guards baffled at how intruders had slipped past their defenses. Drones turned on their masters, their programming mysteriously scrambled, and always the strikes came with precision, never wasted, never careless. Lyra's brilliance guided every move, her mind calculating risks and patterns far faster than the Baron's lumbering commanders could react. Elias became her blade, her shield, her right hand. Where her body faltered, he acted. Where his strategies ended, hers began. Together, they were not just allies but a force that moved like one. Mind across two bodies. The Baron's court, once so eager to laugh, now whispered nervously behind closed doors. Tales spread of his daughter who walked again, clad in a suit of living metal. Some said she was a ghost, others a sorceress, still others that the human had awakened something cursed in her bloodline. Whatever the rumor, all carried the same edge, fear, Curzon, for his part, dismissed it at first. He mocked the rumors, declaring them cowards' tales. But when his supply routes began collapsing and his soldiers deserted in droves, his confidence cracked. His laughter grew thinner. His mandibles clicked in irritation more often than in amusement. And when he finally learned who led the rebellion, the very daughter he had mocked and discarded, his fury knew no bounds. She dares defy me. He roared in his throne room, his armored claws raking deep scars into the floor. My broken wretch of a child dares raise her hand against me. But rage could not undo the truth. His armies were bleeding from 100 hidden wounds. His fortress no longer felt unassailable. For the first time in decades, Baron Curzon felt the creeping hand of fear. For the rebels, the turning point came when Lyra stood openly before them, not hidden in some storage chamber, but in the wide hall of a captured depot. The exosuit gleamed under the firelight, its servos whispering as she moved, her gaze sweeping across the gathered soldiers and servants who now called themselves her followers. They will tell you we are traitors, she declared. They will. Say we are weaklings, cripples, cast-offs. Let them. Because tomorrow, when we strike at the heart of the Baron's fleet, they will see the truth. They will see what they threw away, and they will learn to fear it. The roar that answered her shook the walls. Elias stood just behind her, watching, his chest swelling with pride. This was no longer the Baron's cruel joke. This was no longer a discarded daughter. The chamber was filled with silence. Dust and smoke from the broken pillars lingered in the air as Kieran stood, chest heaving, facing the gathered nobles and warriors. At his side, still bound to the chair though radiating an energy none could deny, was Serenia, the alien Baron's daughter. The girl who had once been dismissed as a cruel joke now sat like a queen at the heart of the storm. The Baron himself had gone pale. His smug grin, so constant in the months past, had dissolved into a mask of disbelief. Impossible, he muttered under his breath. His daughter, his useless, broken daughter, was glowing with strength he had never imagined. He looked, from her to Kieran, and then back again, as though reality itself had betrayed him. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. They had laughed at the gift once. Now none dared to meet Serenia's eyes. The woman who could not stand had stood taller in spirit than all of them combined. Kieran knelt at her side, his hand brushing hers. Her skin was clammy, but her grip was firm. She had pushed her body beyond its limits, channeling abilities that drew from her mind and spirit rather than flesh. He knew she was exhausted, perhaps even dying, but there was no fear in her eyes. You see them now, don't you? She whispered to him, her voice still trembling but laced with triumph. They look at me not as a burden, but as power. Yes, Kieran said softly, his throat tight. They'll never laugh again. But Serenia did not care for laughter or scorn. She turned her gaze upon her father, the Baron who had given her away like discarded trash. You thought me worthless, she said, her voice carrying across the room. A daughter unfit to bear your name. But strength is not always in the sword, nor in the body that wields it. Her eyes flared again with faint light, her aura pressing against every mind in the chamber. It is in will, and mine is stronger than yours. The Baron flinched. For the first time, the mighty lord of his house felt small. The alien courtiers whispered among themselves, some fearful, some intrigued. A shift was happening. They could sense it, the way one feels the pull of gravity when a new star is born. Kieran straightened, placing himself between Serenia and her father. You made her a weapon by underestimating her, and you gave her to me thinking it would break me. Instead, you gave me the greatest ally I could ever have. The Baron's lips curled into a snarl. You dare speak this way to me? A human? Of all things? I don't speak as a human, Kieran replied evenly, his voice like steel. "I speak as the one who saw what you were too blind to see." The weight of his words settled over the chamber. The courtiers could not look away from Serenia, who now sat like a beacon of defiance. Even paralyzed, she seemed unshakable, and her presence made the grand hall tremble with something ancient, something unyielding. For a long moment, the Baron said nothing. His pride warred with his survival instinct. Finally, he turned sharply and strode away, his cape billowing behind. Him. He would not face his daughter's gaze again, not today. When the heavy doors shut behind him, the room exhaled. Conversations erupted in hushed tones, but the truth was clear. Serenia had seized her own destiny. Kieran bent low beside her, brushing back a strand of her dark hair. "You've changed everything, Serenia. For them, for me, for yourself." Her lips curved into a tired but radiant smile. "You gave me the chance to see myself. Without you, I would still be hidden in shadows." "No," Kieran corrected gently, squeezing her hand. "The strength was always there. You just needed someone to believe in it." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of release. She had lived her life in chains, first by her body, then by her father's cruelty. But now those chains were broken. She was still paralyzed, still fragile, yet she had become something greater than her captors or her weakness. She had become a symbol. From that day forward, her story spread. Some whispered of a human who had awakened the will of a forgotten daughter. Others spoke of a girl who, though bound to a chair, could bring nobles to their knees with her sheer presence. The truth was simpler. It was not pity or cruelty that defined her fate, but choice. Her choice to rise, and Kieran's choice to stand with her. And so the cruel gift became a gift of destiny. The alien Baron had sought to humiliate, but instead, he had planted the seed of rebellion. Serenia's strength, hidden for so long, had burst into the open. And at her side stood a human who would never let the galaxy forget her name. For in the end, the Baron's daughter was not a burden. She was a storm, and storms reshape the stars.